Hey y'all, it's MJ from Ultra Love. How are you? So, I'm unlisted right now. I'm taking a break from the live shares for various reasons, including my own internal guidance system. And I'm continuing to feel glorious clarity around the shape-shifting of Ultra Love, my own path and journey, and also the clarity of sharing on this channel, which a lot of us know this whole year has ultimately been a monumental shape-shifting, like a monumental upheaval as far as like modus operandus. This is how we used to do things, and now we're starting to finally get the clarity around, and this is how you're going to be doing things. And ultimately, to effectively shapeshift, a lot of us will have had to go over patterns yet again, to see where we're still possibly giving our power away, or areas simply in our own beingness and in our body where we're not fully loving the self, and deeper listening I'm hearing as far as for new paradigm community, thought leaders, change makers, business owners in this energy field. It really is super important that we're embodying the true source of our own individual power. Hence the loops and the patterns that we're often getting entangled in or getting looped back into. It's all for learning, and that is again the beauty of the work around coming back to love, coming back to compassion, coming back to acceptance, and this is a big part of it's one of the in the notes for sure. So embodying the true source power, and this month we're going to continue to witness this greater awakening around questioning, and the last couple days, and it could obviously have a lot to do with the energy of Halloween, but there has been this like eerie, really slow, like sort of stillness, which again gives me that feeling of we're at another big shift point. And whenever there's a shift point, I get a sense of like another kind of big pocket of mass collective energy is beginning to question their reality. And just that alone can create such a gap in our patterned thinking, that it creates this energy field of like, like, what is life? And so more people having those kind of downloads, those kind of questions for the empath or the sensitive intuitives. It's like feeling into that like no man's land, as it were, especially with like the environmental propaganda and the political propaganda. It's almost like going mental with the level of distortion, and also sort of like a backlash energy of like this feeling of you're never gonna escape it. You're never gonna be able to escape your own patterns or your own self. And yet, to me, this angle of paradigm shift, it's already like done. It's already well and truly set in motion. And the attempts of those other forces, it is futile at this point, because the new codes have really truly been anchored and are continuing to be anchored. So the knowing of self, embodying the true source power, Now this has been an interesting shift for me. You guys know that I tend to share and propagate astrology as a cool source of information. And yet the notes I'm getting here are like we're moving even beyond astrology as a construct and the dictates of time and space. So we're claiming contracts from time lords and spatial indoctrination, which is again true sovereignty in freedom as a unique individuation of consciousness. So soul keys through remembrance, and that's been part of the last pattern shift. So going over aspects again has been a huge part of like embodying those sort of final bits to continue this, because we're all essentially being guided, right? And so it's like we get the next piece when we get the next piece. In as far as embodying divine imagination as fluid stardust self, and that's making me think of like not to overthink it, just to become it, just to be that which you're desiring in that feeling space, which is the manifestation of the divine essence. No compromise and no doubt. So the more we embody that, the less fear, doubt, worry, any of the other can come into compromise or play with or assuage. And totally unique stardust code. So this is part of the kind of upgrade and download and the stuff we talk about in various spiritual circles. Remembering that the essence of individuation, or the idea of knowing the self, is really truly like only contained within the oneness field of self. So in essence, and this is quite clear to me in my own reality, as soon as we try to know other, we've come out of self, and thus we're projecting and or we're seeking self in other. And this is where it's important for us to come into the breath and come into self-love and come into like, and I do it too, but like like so often when we're triggered in our pain body, the mind, like as in the default setting of the mental body, wants to either figure out why or wants to blame and attack other for how we feel. And yet in my own personal practice, it's like feeling it all, but not mentally trying to understand, not trying to project, not, because then we start to come up with all these different, again, thought projections around like the negativity aspect, i.e. we blame and attack, and then we project out those negative feelings as something outside of self, rather than embodying those. So these last few years for me have been really about integrating abandonment, integrating rejection, integrating, and this is where I've come to recognize all those things and continue to break patterns, which now it's like Esther Hicks talking about getting out in front of the manifestation, so the more aware we are of our own patterns, the more we can break free from them. In as far as our base tones, our subtle people-pleasing patterns, our patterns that, and I'm starting to recognize a connection between the people, people pleasing is my own thing, and everyone will have their own style of patterning, right? But it is ultimately a base tone. It's seeking validation and or seeking completion and or seeking fulfillment, love, joy, freedom in other, versus being that container within the self. And again, it's beautiful to share on these platforms, but remember that we're only like, and this is part of, I guess, the polarity increasing in my personal physical reality, is that this is my work, and so I share my work in exchange for financial reward to live my life in my 3D reality. And the reason our intuition is guiding us to break out of certain base tone patterns is that energetically they don't serve us in living in our 3D reality. And so again, when I share here, I'm not in my personal 3D reality watching other YouTube videos, and that's part of my own personal point of attraction. It's part of my service, is that for my personal enjoyment, for one, and like clarity, I don't want to listen to other people's thoughts and ideas about reality, because I have my own. And like the more I just like give myself the freedom to noodle, the more I enjoy it as well. Life is amazing. And since publishing and ultimately writing the book was like one and the same as me giving myself permission to be free, and also like the awareness of patterns. And then the continuation since its publication has been more like, again, it's almost like I had to publish the book to then like hold myself accountable when more deep painful stuff was kicking off around love and romance, you know, and things like that. That funny old encounter with empathy and narcissism. And again, we can all exhibit the tendency of both of both. But there's been a huge wave of activation in these last couple of years or more, maybe, but certainly the belt has been intensified these last couple of years around that. And then it's almost like we have to repeat the pattern a few more times. And then again, it's a little different angles, but I personally do really feel liberated when I'm not out like to attack, and yet at the same time sometimes we really do have to be able to claim our space and claim our freedom. And if there is a resonance field that can't respect that or is wanting to entangle, we can do whatever is necessary. Again, it's a matrix field, it's an illusion. That's why when we're seeking self and other, it usually doesn't, especially if you're on this freedom path and transformational journey and yada yada yada, it never turns out good. You know, like this idea of helping is that's not true, because I mean, we all want to extend ourselves and be kind and everything, but when there's a lack of clarity, and again, it's so divine. This is like, again, even though we trigger the shit out of one another, in truth the learning is divine on a soul level, because this is all what's helping us break free, you know. So mega hot love vibrashe. But again, I'm really getting this sense over the last few days of like, be here now in the 3D reality. And I would, as I continue to go into editing for Unplug for Freedom, it's really I'm teaching myself around being even more disciplined and discerning. It's so much like this infinity loop of like coming back, like anchoring the new energy very much in the 3D reality and like focusing on that. So yeah, remember that piece around the totality, as in the self. So, and I only ever speak for myself, y'all. That's the point of it as well. Like, your interpretation, whatever is your own, and then the way you work with the information is your own, or not, or not working with it. You know, there's bajillions of YouTube people sharing information, and the information we choose to ingest is where we are, right? So I just tend to ingest nature and people that I find fascinating in my 3D reality, and programs that I just find are entertaining. you know, for half an hour or an hour every day. And then the work, the service, and the creativity. And then bookings, when yeah, I'm making bookings for the 2 for 1. That's over, by the way. But thank you so much. It's been really helpful. Okay, so yeah, we're embodying divine imagination as fluid stardust self, no compromise and no doubt. So the more, and the same, it's so accelerated and like paradoxical, and I feel this like it's very much overlaid at this point. Hence, we're like in the fear, facing down the fear, feeling all these aspects of possible doubt, or like, what is left, and am I crazy, and am I blah blah, but like deep, but this continual expansion of like the deep knowing, hence the refinement of thought vibration, like getting more clear. So it's like I can really honor and reflect back, like there's very little negative self-talk anymore within my field. And or if like a hate-filled thought, like I hate you or you're disgusting, if that comes up, I'm like, oh, you know, like, but that's not true, I love you. You know, and like and I realized maybe this morning or yesterday, like being in the manifestation of the fear. So like as we face down, whether it's our body fear, whether it's our external reality fear, money fear, love fear, whatever, as we like face it down in our field, it's like worse than ever. We're like more disgusting than ever, or like we feel like we're back to square one, or we feel like it's never gonna lift, or we feel like blah 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 blah. But I feel like this is all part of the paradigm shift energy. I feel like for a lot of us, the patterns that we're witnessing in self are anchoring in the wisdom, or anchoring in the knowledge as far as like conscious competence and manifestation, so that we can be better teachers for the whole and for self. Because to me, that's what this is what the last 4 to 5 years has been, of like not seeking knowledge and external information, but rather only really using the biofeedback of my reality. If we're manifesting our reality, if we're that, and I'm writing about that kind of stuff, then I have to learn the totality of myself via my field, and hence the power within us to continue to follow through with intuition, regardless of what it looks like. Intuition reigns supreme. You know, and then hence recently, it's like I can recognize that if we're trying to like know other, or claim other, or like analyze and project on like how bad things are because other did this, we're not, but then we are, you know, it's all a process, I suppose. But I'm like, I guess that, again, that's been part of my thing, is like when I've been rejected, when I've been abandoned, when people that I love didn't want me, I just held space for myself to feel all the feels and let other be, you know, not trying to control, not trying to, you know, not trying to mentalize anything, you know, to make sense of it. Although, I mean, come on, it does. That's also part of the share here. I'm like, we can witness how the mind goes round and round about how bad the world is and how shit people are, because I feel so awful. And yet the awful feels are the wounds, are the disempowered wounding, the enslavement wounding. And there's some major like awarenesses now around the heavy laden indoctrination of so-called love and romance and relationship. I'm seeing it so clearly of like how profound that is. Yeah, anywho, okay, so totally unique stardust codes, what individuation of self, and then only one self can know the self. So just, that's like, I think, a fairly useful piece. Whenever your mind is attaching to an external construct, it's not in your beingness in the presence. And then also be aware of that. We love sharing online and we're sharing information, but unless it's a very clear exchange, there's usually an aspect of patterned or distortion without the clarity, right? Because in essence, it is our manifest reality around us that we're in truth working on, you know? That's why I do talk about, like, yes, great meeting in the 3D. At the same time, like, there's no guarantee or promise around any of that, you know? Because gosh, for me and as well, like, it's so fast. These accelerated shifts are so fast. Okay, so yay, knowing the self and like that piece of like the mind is going into analytical or victimhood or blame and attack, out of reactivity ultimately, and then that's still helping us all shapeshift or like embody this shift to know the self, and then fear patterns resurface for release and clear out of junk DNA. And that's still like, some of you guys have known this, of like actual sinusy stuff, which I have not experienced in many years. And it's like a whole full blown, and I started to feel the bug, like for real, coming up probably even before Morocco, maybe even like since Portugal, since these intense, profound integration, like, but I can't even like put it into words yet. There's speed, and yet the awareness is slowing down. Again, it's like a paradox, and yet it's completely out of my control, but my presence field is more like in that feeling of like being able to hold space for it all, basically, in love. So like patterns resurface, and I'm like, oh, ball sacks, but like, okay, I'll face that down. Okay, I love it no matter what. Okay, blah 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 blah. So the mental clarity is becoming more clear, but it doesn't mean that the residue of the patterns isn't just as intense as ever. And then I have a note about we're transitioning. We're still transitioning, which is why that weird timeline thing is happening, of like, we're still, i.e., like, I'm sure Mercury's in retrograde or whatever, which is again another collective agreement. It's not that those planets out there that we talk about have any power over us necessarily, but it's all astrology, and like a lot of these channels and new conversations are ultimately bridging consciousness. They're helping humanity expand their mind, basically. And then unlocking these codes of information that can help us manifest in an abundant, light-filled, freedom, sexylicious, like, in whatever way we truly serve. And yet there's only unity within the self, and thus it's our own self-responsibility to manifest all the love we desire, to manifest all the money we desire, to manifest all the, any aspect of our own disempowerment is a hole, essentially, in our beingness, in our soul, and that hole will always want to be filled. And unless we call out the base tone pattern that doesn't it just, and again, in a simple sense, it's just stuff that doesn't feel good. Intuition reigns supreme. Like, intuition can sense when something's not quite aligned or not quite right, and there again, it's not up to us to figure it out for other, and especially if there's a part of us wanting to kind of claim or control. So yeah, and then I'm sure I mentioned this already, this note, it's really slow and a little eerie. I have no doubt that's something also to do with the veil being thin around Halloween. So I'll go over the notes again. There's a bigger question now among the collective of like, what is the Matrix, which is like blowing people's minds, suddenly like seeing beyond the veil in various capacities. Knowing, so embodying true source power. Some of us are now bridging beyond astrology and the dictates of time space. So we're reclaiming contracts from Time Lords and spatial indoctrination. This is freedom. This is continuation of the freedom path to create the reality we're desiring via the feeling body. Soul keys through remembrance. This has been part of this last cycle. going over. It's like this whole year has just been review, like, yeah, and review, and then transforming the residue. Basically, it's super tiring, but like, whatevs. This is what we're in, to move into these more benevolent, joyful, divine essence energies, really, to embody the light. Embody divine imagination as fluid stardust self. There's no compromise and no doubt in that beingness as a whole. And totally unique stardust code. So that's where we can't embody the full totality if we're still seeking that in other, or trying to get it from other. We have to embody the fullness. Hence all these patterns around love, money, and whatever, for any individual, whatever aspects we're healing, right? Only one self can know the self. Okay, so in our mental body, if we're still projecting, if still trying to analyze and figure out other, it's possibly disempowering the holding space and healing and knowing the self. And ultimately, again, only the one self can know those patterns in self. So it's not up to us as individuals to figure out others' patterns. That's others' responsibility, and then ours is our own. Intuition reigns supreme. Yeah, so and I just had the vision of like the light being, like they're coming into unity, basically, like a whole, not like fractalized, not holes everywhere. It's just a being of light, fully anchored here on earth, not unconsciously being energy siphoned as well. And that's part of the freedom breaks of unlocking the codes around this idea of matrix energy, is that we pull them into self. And it's like one and the same. So if we're not feeding, if we're not being, and if we're not unconsciously allowing our energy to be siphoned back into this thing we call the matrix, then we become that light-filled essence. And then that is also the attraction point to activate and awaken other fear patterns, which is one of the self, because we've been telling the story for a while. Fear patterns resurface for release, clearing out the junk DNA. We might have sinusy, like I'm just speaking for myself, but it might happen that we have these purges and clear outs, and whatever, the body is releasing a whole bunch of shiaz. And then yeah, recognize that this whole year, life, I don't know, it is there, we're in this transition phase, and it's very paradoxical in as far as like our awareness is like speeding up, the refinement of the awareness and the subtlety of, yeah, and then peculiarly, like the time on, like the perception of time on the 3D level is really slow, but then that's part of like having that heightened awareness. It's like, that is like the matrix, isn't it? It's like seeing everything in this slowed down way. Everything is like moving in slow motion, but there's an increased heightened awareness. So I hope that was useful to you guys. It's all the notes I got. I will do my very, very best to continue with the collective intuitions. Miss y'all in the live shares, but you guys, I know you love and respect the intuition guidance as far as reserving the energy. If you want to book a session, a perspective call, intuitive reading, feel free to do so. You can go to altalove.com, and if you're desiring a call from a very earnest place and the rates are too high, you are more than welcome to message me and let me know what you can afford. I'm human. just like you. There's no kind of corporate or people above dictating anything here at Ultra Love. So yeah, feel free. And especially if you're wanting to have multiple sessions, we can work on a negotiate a rate that suits us both. I love you guys so much. Have an awesome day. And I will probably in a few days or weeks even, if any of you are in the UK, in Bath, Somerset, I'm speaking at the Bath Vegan Festival, November 9th, 3 p.m. at the Pavilion. And shortly after that, I will be doing the December 2019 readings. Oh my god, I'm just getting like chills thinking about December, and then like the like, cuz everything's properly manifesting now. And then yeah, so I'll be doing the tarot, and then also I haven't done it, but I might go live later and do intuitive daily tarot. But I'll do the monthly Decembers, and I'll probably be doing the collective intuitions at least once a month to give you an ultra love perspective and intuitively guided, collective intuition. And that's just a kind of snapshot of the energies that we're in and that we might be experiencing as an awakening collective. I love you guys loads. Have an awesome day. Mega appreciation. Virtual hugs. Peace out.